Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Sāti in Jeta's Grove and within Pandika's Park. Now on that occasion a pernicious view had arisen in a monk named Sāti, son of a fisherman. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the rounds of rebirth, not another. This view is, now these days we call it a Hindu view, but it's Brahmin view. And it's the belief that you have a permanent soul, a permanent self that goes from one lifetime to the next. Several monks, having heard about this, went to the monk Sāti and asked him, "Friend Sāti, is it true that such a pernicious view has arisen in you?" It's always funny to me. If somebody comes up and asks you, "Is it true that you're so stupid to believe this?" And that's what they're saying. Exactly so, friends. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the rounds of rebirth, not another. Then those monks, desiring to detach him from that pernicious view, pressed and questioned and cross-questioned him. "Friend Sāti, do not say so. Do not misrepresent the Blessed One. It is not good to misrepresent the Blessed One. The Blessed One would not speak thus, for in many ways the Blessed One has stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there is no origination of consciousness. Yet, although pressed and questioned and cross-questioned by those monks in this way, the monk Sāti, son of a fisherman, still obstinately adhered to that pernicious view and continued to insist upon it. Since the monks were unable to detach him from that pernicious view, they went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat down at one side and told him all that had occurred, adding, "Venerable Sir, since we could not detach the monk Sāti, son of a fisherman, from the pernicious view, we have reported this matter to the Blessed One." Then the Blessed One addressed a certain monk. "Thus, come monk, tell the monk Sāti, son of a fisherman." He was the son of a fisherman, but he hated the smell of fish. So this is kind of a monk joke. "In my name, that the teacher calls him." "Yes, Venerable Sir," he replied, and he went to the monk Sāti and told him, "The teacher calls you, friend Sāti." "Yes, friend," he replied, and he went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, sat down at one side. The Blessed One then asked him, "Sāti, is it true that the following pernicious view has arisen in you? As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is the same consciousness that runs and wanders through the rounds of rebirth, not another." "Exactly so, Venerable Sir, as I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is the same consciousness that runs and wanders through the rounds of rebirth, not another." "What is that consciousness, Sāti?" "Venerable Sir, it is that which speaks and feels and experiences here and there the results of good and bad actions." "Misguided man, to whom have you ever known me to teach the Dhamma in that way?" "Misguided man, have I not stated in many ways consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition. There is no origination of consciousness. But you, misguided man, have misrepresented us by your wrong grasp and injured yourself and stored up much demerit that will lead to your harm and suffering for a long time. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus: Monks, what do you think? Has this monk Sāti, son of a fisherman, kindled even a spark of wisdom in this Dhamma and discipline? Spark of wisdom, that's the key. Wisdom, or being wise, always refers to the links of dependent origination. How could he, Venerable Sir? No, Venerable Sir. When this was said, the monk Sāti, son of a fisherman, sat silent, dismayed, with shoulders drooping and head down, glum and without response. Then, knowing this, the Blessed One told him, Misguided man, you will be recognized by your own pernicious view. And 2,600 years later, we're still talking about him. So that's how we recognize him. I shall question the monks on this matter. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus: Monks, do you understand the Dhamma taught by me, as this monk Sāti, son of a fisherman, does when he misrepresents us by his wrong grasp and injures himself and stores up much demerit? Who is going to say yes to something like that? No, Venerable Sir, for in many discourses the Blessed One had stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there's no origination of consciousness. Good monks, it is good that you understand the Dhamma taught by me thus. For in many ways I have stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there is no origination of consciousness. So what we're talking about is, in order to see, you have to have a good working eye. And the good working eye hits color and form. When the good working eye hits color and form, eye consciousness arises. It needs those conditions for that to happen. And the meeting of these three is called eye contact. We'll get into that in a little bit. But this monk Sāti, son of a fisherman, misrepresents us by his wrong grasp and injures himself and stores up much demerit. For this will lead to the harm and suffering of this misguided man for a long time. Monks, consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on the eye and forms, it is reckoned as eye consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the ear and sounds, it is reckoned as ear consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the nose and odors, it is reckoned as nose consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the tongue and flavors, it is reckoned as tongue consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the body and tangibles, it is reckoned as body consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on mind and mind objects, it is reckoned as mind consciousness. Just as a fire is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it burns. When fire burns dependent on logs, it is reckoned as a log fire. When fire burns dependent on faggots, it is reckoned as a faggot fire. When fire burns dependent on grass, it is reckoned as a grass fire. When fire burns dependent on cow dung, it is reckoned as a cow dung fire. When fire burns dependent on chaff, it is reckoned as a chaff fire. When fire burns dependent on rubbish, it is reckoned as a rubbish fire. So too, consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on the I and forms, it is reckoned as I consciousness. When consciousness arises on the ear and sounds, it is reckoned as ear consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the nose and odors, it is reckoned as nose consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the tongue and flavors, it is reckoned as tongue consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the body and tangibles, it is reckoned as body consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on mind and mind objects, it is reckoned as mind consciousness. Monks, do you see this has come to be? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, do you see its origination occurs with that as nutriment? This means food. This means your attention. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, do you see with the cessation of that nutriment what has come to be is subject to cessation? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus? This has come to be? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus? Does its origination occur with that as nutriment? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus? With the cessation of nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom? This has come to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, are you thus free from doubt? Now he's asking them if they know it from their own experience. This has come to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, are you thus free from doubt here? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, are you thus free from doubt? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? This has come to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, purified and bright as this view is, if you adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand the Dhamma has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of craving and clinging? No, Venerable Sir. So you can't hold on to this view. You have to just keep watching how it occurs. Monks, purified and bright as this view is, if you do not adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand that the Dhamma has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, there are 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that already have come to be, and for the support of those about to come to be. What for? They are physical food as nutriment, gross or subtle, contact as the second, formations as the third, and consciousness as the fourth. Now, monks, these 4 kinds of nutriment have what as their source? What as their origin? From what are they born and produced? These 4 kinds of nutriment have craving as their source, craving as their origin. They are born and produced from craving. And this craving has what as its source? Craving has feeling as its source. Feeling is pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. And this feeling has what as its source? Feeling has contact as its source. And this contact has what as its source? Contact has the 6-fold base as its source. And this 6-fold base has what as its source? The 6-fold base has mentality, materiality as its source. And this mentality, materiality has what as its source? Mentality, materiality has consciousness as its source. And this consciousness has what as its source? Consciousness has formations as its source. And these formations have what as their source? What as their origin? From what are they born and produced? Formations have ignorance as their source, ignorance as their origin. They are born and produced from ignorance. In our language right now, we have the idea that when somebody says that you're ignorant, that means that you're stupid. But in Buddha's terms, ignorance means that you've been ignoring something. And what have you been ignoring? You've been ignoring how the 4 Noble Truths actually do work. The 4 Noble Truths, again, there is suffering. There is a cause of suffering. There is the cessation of suffering. And there is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. When you see a lot of Buddha images, you will see that he has this posture. And this means that he is talking about the first Noble Truth and the second Noble Truth or the third noble truth, or the fourth noble truth. The last two you don't see very often. But that's what the artist that made the Buddha is talking about. This is suffering. Now, in the Samyutta Nikaya, there is a very short verse about the right way to teach and the wrong way to teach. And the wrong way to teach is that everything is suffering. And the right way to teach is the cessation of suffering. But these days, monks generally focus on suffering. They very seldom talk about the cessation of the suffering. What I'm teaching you is the cessation of the suffering. By being able to recognize that tension and tightness in your mind and relax that little membrane that goes around your brain. Every time there's a thought, every time there's a feeling, every time there's a sensation, that membrane tightens around your brain. That is the way that you recognize craving when it arises. Okay, and it can be very, very subtle at sometimes. And you might not even notice that there's a tightness there, and when you relax, you don't feel any difference. But as you continually do that, then you'll start to notice there's a very slight tightness that was there, and when you let that go, your mind becomes clear, your mind becomes alert, your mind becomes bright, and it is pure. Why? Because you've let go of craving. So, what I'm teaching you is the way to recognize that and the way to let that craving go. So every time you relax and you come back to your object of meditation, you're bringing your mind back that is pure, that's clear, that's bright. And this is one of the reasons why you can progress in your meditation very quickly. I was not taught this when I first started meditation. And I was taught straight Vipassana meditation. And in Vipassana, there is no relaxed step. As a result, it starts taking you off of the path that the Buddha is teaching us. The relaxed step can't be overstated. It doesn't matter what kind of thought arises in your mind, there is that little tiny tension that's there. And you have to relax that when you notice it. Craving is the I like it, I don't like it mind. Craving is the start of the belief in a personal self. This is me, this is mine, this is who I am. So when you let go of that craving, you start to see everything as part of an impersonal process. In other words, you are starting to purify the way you see the world around you. And you become much more clear and much more bright when you let go of this tightness. And your mind When you've let go of the craving, your mind stays in the present moment. It's not distracted. That's why your mind is pure. You let go of that tightness, and now smile. Why is smile important? Because it's a wholesome state. It brings your mind so that it's clear and bright, and there can be joy in your mind. And when you have joy in your mind is very clear and bright and alert, and it's very easy to recognize when your mind starts to get heavy and tight. When it gets heavy and tight, guess who has an attachment? What is the attachment? I am that, whatever it is. So this relaxed step is the major thing to recognize and to do. And it has to be intentional relaxing. It's not just, oh, I see that, let it go, and then come back, because you're bringing the craving back with you. And it's subtle, and that tightness is really there. When you're bringing the craving back with you, you're stepping off of the path that the Buddha taught. Okay, and you're developing your ignorance because you're ignoring that little subtle tightness that's there. Now, when you don't do that, when you don't have that relaxed step, after a period of time, tightness starts to manifest in your head. And it is ignored by almost everybody that's practicing meditation. Don't pay attention to that. When I was practicing straight Vipassana, and I've done many retreats, and I even did a 2-year retreat. When I was doing any walking meditation, I took my attention and I put it on my feet, and I was watching each little intention of moving my foot and pushing it forward and placing it down again. And I had this pretty big headache. So I went to the teacher and I told him, when I'm doing the walking meditation, my mind's really tight. And the instruction I got from the teacher was, just ignore it, it's nothing. So in essence, what was the teacher telling me? Ignore the craving, it's nothing. So that's a problem. But when we go back to the original teaching of the Buddha, and we start examining what the Buddha was saying with meditation, he was talking about tranquilizing the bodily formation. What does that mean? Well, when you let go of that tightness in your head, in your mind, it starts to relax all of the rest of your body. A lot of people talk to me about pains in their body, especially when you start out meditation. I can't get comfortable. There's a lot of pain. So I tell you, get as comfortable as you can. Keep smiling, because that pulls up your mindfulness and helps your mindfulness to sharpen. And keep relaxing. And then smiling into things. and bring that smiling mind back to your object of meditation. As you do that, all of a sudden, the tensions in your body start to relax. And when the tensions in your body relax, that means that you've let go of tension in your mind. So it's all interconnected. Okay. Now we're going to do the forward exposition on arising. So, monks, with ignorance as condition,
formations come to be.
With formations as condition,
consciousness comes to be.
With consciousness as condition,
mentality, materiality comes to be.
With mentality, materiality as condition,
sixth sense base comes to be.
With the sixfold base as condition,
contact comes to be.
With contact as condition,
feeling comes to be.
With feeling as condition,
craving comes to be.
With craving as condition,
clinging comes to be.
With clinging as condition,
habitual tendencies come to be.
With habitual tendency as condition,
birth of action comes to be.
With birth of action as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair comes to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. This is how it arises. But we don't really want to focus on how it arises. We want to focus on how it ceases. Okay, we have a reverse order questionnaire on the arising. With birth as condition, aging and death. So it was said, now monks, do aging and death have birth as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Aging and death have birth as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With birth as condition, aging and death comes to be. With habitual tendency as condition, birth. So it was said, now monks, does birth have habitual tendency as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Birth has habitual tendency as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With habitual tendency as condition, birth comes to be. With clinging as condition, habitual tendency, so it was said. Now, monks, does habitual tendency have clinging as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Habitual tendency has clinging as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With clinging as condition, habitual tendency comes to be. With craving as condition, clinging comes to be. So it was said, now, does clinging have craving as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Clinging has craving as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With craving as condition, clinging comes to be. With feeling as condition, craving comes to be. So it was said, now, monks, does craving have feeling as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Craving has feeling as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With feeling as condition, craving comes to be. With contact as condition, feeling comes to be. So it was said, now, does feeling have contact as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Feeling has contact as condition, Venerable Sir.
Thus we take it in this case. With contact as condition, feeling comes to be. With the sixfold base as condition, contact comes to be. So it was said, now, does contact have the sixfold base as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Contact has the sixfold
Base as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With the sixfold base as condition, contact comes to be. With mentality, materiality as condition, the sixfold base comes to be. So it was said, now monks, does the sixfold base have mentality, materiality as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? The sixfold base has mentality, materiality as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With mentality, materiality as condition, the sixfold base comes to be. With consciousness as condition, mentality, materiality comes to be. So it was said, now monks, does mentality, materiality have consciousness as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Mentality,
Materiality has consciousness as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With consciousness as condition, mentality, materiality comes to be. With formations as condition, consciousness comes to be. So it was said, now monks, does consciousness have formations as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Consciousness has formations as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With formations as condition, consciousness comes to be. With ignorance as condition, formations come to be. So it was said, now monks, do formations have ignorance as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Formations have ignorance as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With ignorance as condition, formations come to be. Good monks, so you say thus, and I also say thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. That is, with ignorance as condition,
formations come to be.
With formations as condition,
Consciousness comes to be.
With consciousness as condition,
Mentality, materiality comes to be.
With mentality, materiality as condition,
Sixth sense base comes to be.
With the sixfold base as condition,
Contact comes to be.
With contact as condition,
Feeling comes to be.
With feeling as condition,
Craving comes to be.
With craving as condition,
Clinging comes to be.
With clinging as condition,
Habitual tendencies come to be.
With habitual tendency as condition,
Birth of action comes to be.
With birth of action as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair comes to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Now we're going to do the forward exposition on cessation. I'm not going to go all the way through this, I think. With the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of formations. with the cessation of formation, cessation of consciousness. With the cessation of consciousness, cessation of
mentality, materiality.
With the cessation of mentality, materiality, cessation of
six sense bases.
With the cessation of the sixfold base, cessation of
contact.
With the cessation of contact, cessation of
feeling.
With the cessation of feeling, cessation of
craving.
With the cessation of craving, cessation of
clinging.
With the cessation of clinging, cessation of
habitual tendencies.
With the cessation of habitual tendencies, cessation of
birth of actions.
With the cessation of birth of action, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Oh, this is the part I'm not going to go all the way through. I just give you a taste of it. With the cessation of birth, cessation of aging and death, so it was said, now monks, do aging and death cease with the cessation of birth of action or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Aging and death cease with the cessation of birth. Venerable Sir, thus we take it in this case. With the cessation of birth, cessation of aging and death. With the cessation of habitual tendency, cessation of birth. With the cessation of habitual tendency, cessation of clinging. Oh, I messed up. Anyway, we'll let go. This went into the dots. So it's hard to do just by reading like that. Good monks, so you say thus, and I also say thus. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. That is, with the cessation of ignorance comes the cessation of
formation.
With the cessation of formation, cessation of
consciousness.
With the cessation of consciousness, cessation of
mentality, materiality.
With the cessation of mentality, materiality, cessation of
the sixfold base.
With the cessation of the sixfold base, cessation of
contact.
With the cessation of contact, the cessation of
feeling.
With the cessation of feeling, cessation of
craving.
With the cessation of craving, cessation of
clinging.
With the cessation of clinging, cessation of
habitual tendencies.
With the cessation of habitual tendencies, cessation of
birth of action.
With the cessation of birth of action, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you run back to the past thus? Were we in the past? Were we not in the past? What were we in the past? How were we in the past? Having been what did we become in the past? No, Venerable Sir. If you start thinking about the past, are you in the present moment at that time? No. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you run forward to the future thus? Shall we be in the future? Shall we not be in the future? What shall we be in the future? How shall we be in the future? Having been what shall we become in the future? Oh, of course not. Knowing and seeing in this way, knowing and seeing how these links arise and how they cease, You haven't got time to think about other stuff, projections of the future. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you be inwardly perplexed about the present? Thus, am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? You don't have any of those kind of ideas coming up at all. Why? Because they all have I in them. And there is no I. It's an impersonal process. This whole recitation of the links of dependent origination, there's no I in there. There's no self in there. So how would you come up with questions of, am I or am I not? You see? Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you speak this way? The teacher is respected by us. We speak as we do out of respect for the teacher. No. Why? Because you have the direct experience. You don't have to refer to somebody else their thoughts and ideas, because you know for yourself how these links actually work. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you speak thus? The recluse says this, and we speak thus at the bidding of the recluse. Of course not. You wouldn't say that. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you acknowledge another teacher? No. Why? Because you're your own teacher. You're teaching this and how these links work personally. You're doing it from your own direct experience, from your own direct knowledge of how this actually does work.
Are the monks responding to those questions in
When they say, no, Venerable Sir, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you return to the observances, tumultuous debates, and auspicious signs of ordinary recluses and Brahmins, taking them as the core of the holy life? No, Venerable Sir. Do you speak only of what you have known, seen, and understood for yourself? Yes, Venerable Sir. Good monks, so you have been guided by me with this Dhamma, which is visible here and now. Now this is the part of the good qualities of the Dhamma that a lot of people recite, but they don't actually practice it. And that is, this Dhamma is immediately effective. Okay? And you see that for yourself. It's immediately effective when you let go of that craving, that tightness in your head. Then there's no thoughts. There's no distractions. Your mind is clear. Your mind is bright. Your mind is very pure. It's not clouded by anything at all. So this is immediately effective. When I was practicing straight vipassana, it took me 5 years to figure out what the meditation wasn't before I could figure out what it was. Now, is that what you would call immediately effective?
No, Venerable Sir.
No, Venerable Sir.
No way you can answer.
But when you start practicing the way that I'm showing you, by letting go of that craving, it is immediately effective. Now, everybody here that's been practicing, you're progressing in the meditation very nicely. In 2 or 3 days, you're seeing for yourself the progress that you're making. And that's truly amazing for it to happen that fast. I promise you it's amazing. Inviting inspection, onward leading, to be experienced by the wise for themselves. Why are you wise? Because you're seeing the links of dependent origination for yourself. For it was with reference to this that it has been said, monks, this Dhamma is visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, onward leading to be experienced by the wise for themselves. Okay, now we have a round of existence, conception to maturity. Monks, the descent of the embryo takes place through the union of 3 things. Here there is the union of the mother and father, but the mother is not in season, and the coming being is not present. In that case, no descent of the embryo takes place. Here there is the union of the mother and father, and the mother is in season, but the coming being is not present. In this case, too, no descent of the embryo takes place. But when there is the union of the mother and father, and the mother is in season and the coming being is present, through the union of these 3 things, the descent of the embryo takes place. The mother then carries the embryo in her womb for 9 or 10 months, with much anxiety as a heavy burden. Then, at the end of 9 or 10 months, the mother gives birth with much anxiety as a heavy burden. Then, when the child is born, she nourishes it with her own blood, for the mother's breast milk is called blood in the Noble One's discipline. When he grows up and his faculties mature, the child plays at such games as toy plows, tip cat, somersaults, toy windmills, toy measures, toy carts, and toy bow and arrow. When he grows up and his faculties mature still further, the youth enjoys himself provided and endowed with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, with forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. Sounds cognizable by the ear that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. Odors cognizable by the nose that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. Flavors cognizable by the tongue that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. Tangibles cognizable by the body that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. On seeing a form with the eye, he lusts after it if it is pleasant. He dislikes it if it's unpleasant. He abides with mindfulness unestablished, with a limited mind, and he does not understand, as it actually is, the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. engaged as he is in favoring and opposing whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant. He delights in that feeling, welcomes it, remains holding to it. As he does so, delight arises in him. Now, delight in feelings is craving and clinging. With his craving and clinging as condition, habitual tendency comes to be. With habitual tendency as condition, birth of action comes to be. With birth of action as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. On hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting a flavor with the tongue, on touching a tangible with the body, on cognizing a mind object with mind. He lusts after it if it's pleasing. He dislikes it if it's unpleasing. Now, delight in feelings is craving and clinging. With this craving and clinging as condition, habitual tendency comes to be. With habitual tendency as condition, birth comes to be. With birth of action as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Ending the round, the gradual training. Here, monks, a Tathagata appears in the world, accomplished and fully awakened. Perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime knower of worlds, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, awakened and blessed. He declares this world with its gods, with its maras, with its brahmas, this generation with its recluses and brahmins, its princes and its people, which he has himself realized with direct knowledge. He teaches Dhamma, good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. With the right meaning and phrasing, he reveals a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. A householder or householder's son, or one born in some other clan, hears the Dhamma. On hearing the Dhamma, he acquires faith in the Tathagata. Possessing that faith, he considers thus: household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It's not easy while living in a home to lead the holy life utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard and put on the yellow robe and go forth from the home life into homelessness. On that later occasion, abandoning a small or large fortune, abandoning a small or large circle of relatives, he shaves off his hair and beard and puts on the yellow robe, and goes forth from home life into homelessness. Having thus gone forth and possessing a monk's training and way of life, abandoning the killing of living beings, he abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, conscientious, merciful, he abides compassionate to all living beings. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given, taking only what is given, expecting only what is given. By not stealing, he abides in purity. Abandoning in celibacy, he observes celibacy. Living apart, abstaining from the vulgar practice of sexual intercourse. Now, this is for monks, of course. Abandoning false speech, he abstains from false speech. He speaks truth, adheres to truth, is trustworthy and reliable. One who is no deceiver of the world. Abandoning malicious speech, he abstains from malicious speech. He does not repeat elsewhere what he has heard here in order to divide those people from these. Nor does he repeat to these people what he has heard elsewhere in order to divide these people from those. Thus, he is one who reunites those who are divided, a promoter of friendship. He enjoys concord, rejoices in concord, delights in concord, a speaker of words that promote concord. Abandoning harsh speech and cursing, he abstains from harsh speech and cursing. He speaks such words as are gentle, pleasing to the ear, lovable as go to the heart, are courteous and desired by many and agreeable to many. Abandoning gossip, he abstains from gossip. He speaks at the right time. He speaks what is fact. He speaks what is good. He speaks on the Dhamma and discipline. At the right time, he speaks such words as are worth recording, reasonable, moderate, and beneficial. He abstains from injuring seeds and plants. He practices eating one meal a day, abstaining from eating at night and outside the proper time. He abstains from dancing, singing, music, and theatrical shows. He abstains from wearing garlands, smartening himself with scent, embellishing himself with unguents. He abstains from high and luxurious couches. He abstains from accepting gold and silver. He abstains from accepting raw grain. He abstains from accepting raw meat. He abstains from accepting women and girls. He abstains from accepting men and women slaves. He abstains from accepting goats and sheep. He abstains from accepting fowl and pigs. He abstains from accepting elephants, cattle, horses, and mares. He abstains from accepting fields and land. He abstains from going on errands and running messages. He abstains from buying and selling. He abstains from false weights, false measures, and false metals. He abstains from accepting bribes, deceiving and defrauding, and all forms of trickery. He abstains from wounding, murdering, binding, brigandage, plunder, and violence. He becomes content with robes to protect his body and alms food to maintain his stomach. And wherever he goes, he sets out taking those with him. Just as a bird, wherever he goes, flies with his wings as his only burden, so too the monk becomes content with robes to protect the body and with alms food to maintain his stomach. And wherever he goes, he sets out taking only these with him, along with the truck for all of the books and electronics and things like that. But we won't talk about that. Possessing this aggregate of noble virtue, he experiences within himself a bliss that is blameless. On seeing a form with the eye, he does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left the eye faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the eye faculty, undertakes the restraint of the eye faculty, on hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting a flavor with the tongue, on touching a tangible with the body, on cognizing a mind object with mind. He does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left his mind faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the mind faculty, undertakes the restraint of the mind faculty. Possessing this noble restraint of the faculties, he experiences within himself a bliss that is unsullied. He becomes one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating and urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. Full awareness of what?
Mind.
Full awareness of what mind's attention is doing. When you're doing all of these other actions. Now, this is one of the reasons why I said today I didn't want you to talk while you were eating. Watch mind. Watch what it's doing. Watch how you have these thoughts that come up, and tighten that membrane around your brain. Use your 6 R's. Get in the habit of being able to recognize that as much as you possibly can. Recognize when your mind is distracted away from eating. Release the distraction, relax the tightness caused by that distraction. Re-smile. Even while you're eating, you gotta smile. Return to your object of meditation. Stay with your object of meditation. See, it doesn't matter whether you're defecating or urinating. Stay with what your mind is doing in the present moment. Look at how it gets distracted. Let go of that distraction. Relax. Smile. Come back to what you're doing in the present moment, staying with your spiritual friend. Possessing this aggregate of noble virtue and this aggregate of restraint of the faculties, and possessing this noble mindfulness and full awareness, he resorts to a secluded resting place, the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. On returning from his alms round after his meal, he sits, folding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect, and establishing mindfulness before him. Abandoning covetousness for the world, he abides with a mind free from covetousness. He purifies his mind from covetousness. What is covetousness? I want lust for things. Abandoning ill will and hatred, he abides with a mind free from ill will. Compassionate for the welfare of all living beings, he purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Abandoning sloth and torpor, he abides free from sloth and torpor. mindful and fully aware. He purifies his mind from sloth and torpor. Now there's different ways of getting rid of sloth and torpor. One of the things that's really helpful is when you have sloth and torpor, don't be in a dark room. Okay, there's one thing that happens with almost everybody. I've been meditating for a long time. I meditate better when I am in a dark room. And quite often sloth and torpor comes, and then they have to fight with that. I used to get in arguments with monks because I'd walk into a room and they didn't have the light on, and I'd turn the light on because that helped keep you awake. So if you have sloth and torpor, you can sit outside, but not in the direct sun, but just sit so that there's a lot more light so that you can, it helps wake you up. And one of my favorite things that it says in the suttas, and it really does say this, that if you have a bad case of sloth and torpor, you take your earlobe and you pinch it really hard. And that does wake you up. But the easiest way is to go out and walk. Go out in the sun and walk. And just walk back and forth for 40 or 50 feet. But when you walk, you don't turn around when you get to the end of the walk. Now you walk backwards. As you do that, you start having to pick up your effort and your energy. And then you do that forwards and back for a while. And you come in and you sit. The sloth and torpor will dissipate. It just goes away by itself. Still need to use the 6 R's. But I'm already relaxed. I'm too relaxed. But this is called a contracted mind. Your mind contracts and gets tight. And then you start getting into your dreamy state, and then you start slouching, and then you start bobbing. Okay? Now, what do you do to pick up your awareness and overcome the sloth and torpor more quickly? What you do is you sit a little bit straighter than is comfortable. Okay? Now, your mind is not going to stay on your object of meditation, and these little thoughts are going to come in, and before long you're going to start getting these dreamy thoughts. And right after that, your back starts to slump. Now, when you sit a little bit more straight, so there's a tiny bit of tension in your back. When you start slumping, it's easier to recognize that and straighten up and come back to your object of meditation. After you do that a few times, you've picked up your energy quite a bit, and then the sloth and torpor will disappear. When I was in Burma, there was a period of time that these 2 monks, one of them sat on this side of me and one of them sat on that side of me, and at the same time they would get sloth and torpor. It was like the same time of the day even. And all of a sudden I'm seeing these bobbing back and forth. And I started making jokes about it in my mind. I had bobbing bookends, you know. They were. So I told them my secret for overcoming the sloth and torpor of sitting a little bit straighter, and before long they didn't have that problem anymore. Abandoning restlessness and anxiety, he abides unagitated with a mind inwardly peaceful. He purifies his mind from restlessness and anxiety. Now the way you purify the restlessness, when it gets real bad, you feel like jumping out of your skin. You feel like just getting up and walking and doing something. And that's exactly the opposite of what you want to do. Don't move. Don't move your body at all for any reason. Now, bring up a feeling of tranquility, a feeling of peace and calm. And put that feeling into your heart and radiate that feeling. And as you do that, that restlessness will start to go away. Restlessness is an incredibly painful feeling. So you have to allow that feeling to be there. It's real interesting when people start to, first they start meditating, it's hard to sit still because you got this pain coming up and that pain coming up and you want to move. But the instructions in the meditation are don't move. Now, what's the cause of restlessness? Why does restlessness arise? Because you've broken a precept at some point in your life. How do you overcome that feeling of wanting to move and really get rid of that feeling? By sitting without moving and tranquilize your mind by bringing up this feeling of peace and calm and wishing that peace and calm for your spiritual friend. See, when I'm telling you to practice your loving kindness, I'm telling you that you need to make a wish and feel the wish, then put that feeling in your heart. How can you give loving kindness to someone else if you don't have it in yourself? So when you feel that wish, you start surrounding your friend in your heart with your feeling of loving kindness and radiating that feeling. Now you have something to give. Okay, now you can practice your mindfulness and your generosity. But you have to bring it up for yourself first. So you benefit and they benefit. And they really do. They will feel that difference. Now, sloth and torpor and restlessness, you better become friends with them. Because they're going to stay around until you become an arahant. So you better become familiar with how they work, investigate the experience, use the 6 R's with those. Abandoning doubt, he abides having gone beyond doubt. Unperplexed about wholesome states, he purifies his mind from doubt. As you let go of unwholesome states and bring up wholesome states, your doubts start to disappear. Now, one of the reasons that I want you to smile is because that overcomes a doubt. You see the advantage of smiling and that wholesome state of smiling. So you don't have a lot of doubt whether this is the right path or not, because you know for yourself, this stuff works. It's not a maybe. Got something in my eye. Having abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of mind that weaken wisdom, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, He enters upon and abides in the first jhana. With the stilling of thinking and examining thought, he enters upon and abides in the second jhana. With the fading away as well, of joy, he enters upon and abides in the third jhana. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, he enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure in purity of mindfulness, due to equanimity. On seeing a form with the eye, he does not lust after it if it's pleasing. He does not dislike it if it's unpleasing. He abides with mindfulness established. With an immeasurable mind, he understands as it actually is the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. Having thus abandoned favoring and opposing. This is another way of saying abandoning craving. I like it, I don't like it. Whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant, he does not delight in that feeling, welcome it, or remain holding to it. Oh, a lot of people, when they have pleasant feeling arise in their meditation, they have joy arise, they want to keep it. Oh, this is good stuff. And they try to grab onto it and hold it mentally so it doesn't go away, and that's the fastest way to make it go away. Pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, same coin, different sides. You treat the pleasant feeling in exactly the same way as the unpleasant feeling. You recognize, release, relax, re-smile, return to your object of meditation. Stay with your object of meditation. When you do that, the joy will last for a longer period of time. So you don't keep your attention on the joy or the comfortable feeling in the body or the equanimity whenever it arises. You allow it to be there. Come back to your object of meditation, always. Eventually, the feeling will last for a longer and longer period of time, especially the equanimity. As he does not do so, delight in feeling ceases with him. With the cessation of this delight comes a cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving, cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of habitual tendency. With the cessation of habitual tendency, cessation of birth of action. With the cessation of birth of action, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. On hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting the flavor with the tongue, on touching a tangible with the body, on cognizing a mind object with mind. He does not lust after it if it's pleasing. He does not dislike it if it's unpleasing. With the cessation of his delight comes the cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving, cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of habitual tendency. With the cessation of habitual tendency, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth of action, cessation of aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Monks remember this discourse of mine briefly as delivered in the destruction of craving. Now, we've been sitting here listening to this for a little while. This is the brief version. Okay. The long version takes all night. It takes about 5.5 hours, something like that. And it's a lot of reciting over and over again of those links of dependent origination. There is a teacher in Burma, he died, I think, in the 50s. All he did was get people to come together and recite the links of dependent origination forwards and backwards, over and over, again and again and again and again and again. And as they did that, and they really got it ingrained in their mind, they started seeing those links of dependent origination all the time in everything that they were doing. And because of that, they really started to understand. And with that understanding, they would become Sotapannās. They would become awakened beings. They would become the first stage of sainthood, just by reciting this over and over and truly understanding all of these links. Now, America especially, we are a fast food culture. We like things where our attention span is about 1.25 minutes. And sometimes that's long. Okay? So when you hear something repeated over and over and over, your mind gets bored really easy. And you're not attentive. And when you're not attentive, you're never going to understand how these links of dependent origination actually do work. You can do this through sitting and watching. But the fast track is starting to know all of these links and start seeing that in everything, in every kind of being. You watch birds, you'll be able to recognize the links of dependent origination by their actions. Or dogs or cats. And you start seeing that in everything around you. And when you do that, you start seeing that everything in every being is part of an impersonal process. And this process are these links of dependent origination. Now, each link is the First Noble Truth. That is a disturbance. It is a kind of suffering. There is a cause of that. There is the cessation of that. There is the way to the cessation in each link of dependent origination. So when you're seeing the links of dependent origination, you are also seeing and realizing the Four Noble Truths. There comes a lightness in your mind when you start to actually be able to recognize these different links, and you see that in yourself, and you go, oh, well, that happened because this condition arose. And you start seeing that over and over again. One of the ways that the Buddha taught was by repetition. There's no getting around it. And this book here is very good, but there's a lot of dot, 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 which means it's just repeating. So he didn't want to take the space, because if he took the dot, dot, dot out of each one of the suttas, which I have actually done in my computer at home, a 3-page sutta or a 4-page sutta can turn into a 20-page sutta. But it has all of this repetition over and over and over again. Now, eventually, I'm going to be coming out with some books that have these suttas in them, and I'm changing some of the language, because some of the words that are used are confusing at best, and I'm making it directed towards the meditation. Almost everybody that does any translation of the books, they are directed at scholarship. So I'm going to be doing the entire Majjhima Nikaya, and changing some of the language that makes things easier to practice, so that you'll understand it as soon as you read it. In my spare time. Okay. Monks, remember this discourse of mine briefly as deliverance of the destruction of craving. But remember, Sāti, son of the fisherman, is caught up in a vast net of craving, in a trammel of craving. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So, now you all understand dependent origination completely, right? You have a question?
I have 2 short questions.
Okay.
Number 1 is a beginner question. You mentioned that if you feel sloth and torpor, you should go where there's light, but you shouldn't be in the sunlight.
Not the direct sunlight.
And I'm curious why.
The direct sunlight will make that sloth and torpor worse.
Okay.
You want to be in a place that's very light, but not in the heat of the sun makes it much
I
worse.
saw something. It looks so cozy when it's not there. And the next question is, and again, forgive my beginner ignorance, if you feel sloth and torpor, why don't you just go take a nap and come back?
Because then you're giving into it and you don't learn how it arises,
Okay.
and you won't progress near as fast when you do that.
Which one?
Now, what happens after lunch?
Oh, is that gonna miss? Mentality? No, it's an important mentality. I don't know what happened in the end.
Can I talk now? What happens with people after lunch is right around between 2 and 3 o'clock, you start really feeling the sloth and torpor. What I generally recommend for people to do, especially when it's hot, like in Asia and that sort of place, that's the time to take a bath. And as soon as you take a bath, your body wakes right up. See, as soon as you eat, all of the energy starts to go into your stomach, and it stays there. That energy is working quite a bit. So you can sit right after you eat, but then about between 2 and 3 o'clock, all of a sudden that energy is just, it's gone now because so much has been put into digestion. So your body wants to take a rest. And when you get it wet and it wakes up. So take a shower about that time. if that's your problem. For some people, it's not a problem at all. Okay?
Thank you.
Don't feel embarrassed because you're new at asking questions.
Oh,
The questions that you ask are just as relevant for everybody else here, to be quite honest. So don't be shy. Yeah.
Because everything's an impersonal process, what exactly is doing the ignoring in the first link of dependent origination?
The belief that the suffering is personal. I.
But if
See,
there
what's
is
the
no I,
what's the cause of suffering? Okay, you have a painful feeling arise.
Right.
Whose painful feeling is it? It is suffering. There's a cause of that suffering is I want to control it. I want it to stop. I want it to go away. Okay, you made up of 5 things. You have a physical body, you have feeling, perception,
But that came before
formations.
the formations though, right?
What?
Doesn't ignorance come before the formations? Of body, speech, and mind?
You're getting things mixed up. Okay, I'm talking about 5 aggregates right now, and you're talking about something else.
Okay.
Okay? Now you have a physical body, there is feeling, there is perception, there is formation, there is consciousness. When a painful feeling arises, we try to think the feeling away. And the more we try to think the feeling away, the bigger and more intense that feeling becomes. And there's a tight mental fist of aversion wrapped around that pain. It's repulsive. Pain is a repulsive thing. I don't like it, I don't want it there. But the truth is, when pain arises, it is there. So you have to allow that feeling to be there by itself. And this is, it doesn't matter whether it's mental or physical. You treat it in the same way. Allow that to be there. Let go of your thinking about. Relax. Let that tight mental fist go. The truth is, it's there. You can't stop it. You can't make it any different than it is. The truth is the truth. When you allow a painful feeling to be, it will go away by itself. But as long as there's any aversion to it, it gets bigger and more intense. It's like if I took a hot coal, from the barbecue, take one of those coals out after it's red hot, and I put it in my hand and I say, oh, that hurts. And then what I try to do to make that pain go away is I start squeezing it tighter and tighter and tighter. Is that the way to let go of that pain? No. The way to let go of the pain is to open up and let it be. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. Oh, that's coming from the craving part, right? Because we have these cravings, we grasp onto them, and then that's where the pain is.
And that's how actually this works.
Right. But I was talking about the ignorance that came before the body and formations. What is doing the ignoring of Four Noble Truths?
Go ahead.
Okay, you're stuck on the English translation of Atta as being no self, and it has very much botched up Buddhism. If you use the words personal and impersonal, it helps you understand a little better. Okay? It isn't that you are not here, the self. They use different words to translate this, okay? And identity or personality actually works better for the person than this no self and self. It doesn't work because the Westerner immediately says, I'm here, no self, what's that? And it messes everybody up, okay? It's the idea of the consequences of if there was a self that's real important, the idea of identity or personality. And we took the word personal on the chart and showed you like which of these links really suffer from the personal nature and the impersonal nature. So the ignorance is a problem because the consequence of the idea of a self, don't get wrapped up in what this really is, okay? The consequences of this idea of self is causing you a problem, because then the consequence of the self is you take everything personally. And that's
And
where
you tighten your mind
you
around
tighten your
it.
mind,
You tighten
you
your
see.
body around it.
It's
and
where
you
the
cause
tightness for the
yourself all
craving
kinds
comes
of
from.
problems.
It was never self and no self. It was the consequence of self and the consequence of no self.
But how can the consequence of self arise if there's no body, speech, or mind to begin with?
The untrained mind functions in ignorance. It's ignoring something. What are you ignoring? You're ignoring the Four Noble Truths, the dependent origination, which is actually human cognition. It's how
You have an idea that this is a real slow process. That was 100,000 arising and passing away of the links of dependent origination.
Oh, that makes sense now.
See? See? It's all spinning.
And it really happens very fast. That's why when you get to infinite consciousness and you see each individual consciousness arise and pass away, that's really something. Okay? Consciousness is only a very small part of the dependent origination, and to see individual consciousnesses arise and pass away at each one of the sense doors is really a very amazing feat. Will you be able to do that on this retreat? Do you follow the directions? Wait and see.
Essentially, Bhanti's teaching you how to speed up your awareness so that everything that's moving so fast, it's almost
it's not
like
speed
you
up the awareness.
Sharpen
it sharpens
Sharpen
the
it.
awareness. Yeah.
This is changing the subject, but I wanted to offer then this sloth and torpor, that there's another way of dealing with that in terms of paying closer attention or investigating what's happening in the mind.
Right. It's always with the 6
And
R's.
so that brings up the energy, or the energizing factor of perhaps mindfulness, and that has the effect of then moving on or changing the attention so that the sloth and torpor then passes.
Yeah. And when you're first starting out, it doesn't. You need to have something more than that.
Okay.
When you start getting deeper in your practice, what you're saying is perfect. But for beginners to start off, that's why I give them the other things. Yeah.
Bhante, when I'm practicing loving kindness, sometimes I get the image of the Paticcasamuppada, the 12 links of causation, and I 6-star that because my main objective is, if I can call it that, practices.
For right now, yes.
Okay.
As you start to go deeper, you'll start seeing these things more clearly. What you're doing right now is getting into your thinking a little bit. And thinking and direct experience, there's like no comparison. The thinking is so slow. But your direct experience, you're able to see things much more clearly. And you'll recognize.
Does that mean that the faculty of knowing, your knowing is much faster than thinking? Is that
Oh
what you're-
yes, by a lot.
So your apprehension is like way faster than
Oh,
the thought
yeah.
process.
Comprehension.
Comprehension.
The second question was in regards to seeing the dependent origination when we look at the rest of the living beings around us. If you could give me an example, I would appreciate it. One instance that I'm noticing a lot while walking over this field is many tiny little holes where animals burrow down and hide. I couldn't help but just to see, the rebirth and fear factor within this individual entity that ended up being born based on their craving of running away, hiding away from their fears, and burrowing down deep into the earth to avoid uncomfortable sensations. That's what I'm picking up.
Well, and you see a bird, and they sit on a branch or they sit on a post or something. They're always looking around.
They're literally vibrating. Their metabolism's so fast.
But you can see how those links and that belief in a self causes suffering. We have a dog at our center. We have actually 3, but one in particular, she is very attuned to anything to eat. And you can see her lust come up.
To be fair, she has thyroid.
Well, it doesn't matter what the cause is. What matters is that you're able to see that come up in her mind and her identification with it and the birth of action and the sorrow and lamentation and pain when she doesn't get it, when she doesn't get that piece of food. You're able to see that.
Dog Dharma.
Yes.
I was going to ask, on piggybacking on that, are there any stories in the history where someone has been capable of maybe teaching an animal about that?
No.
Or
Not-
experimented with it?
No, not really. The way their mind works is different than the human beings, and they understand feeling, but they don't understand subtleties of thought. Okay.
There is the one story about the wild elephant that bowed down to the noble one.
Oh yeah. But that was feeling again, because the noble one was radiating loving kindness to them.
Yes, exactly.
And the story about the elephant and the monkey that took care of the Buddha for one ranger retreat. But that again, they did that out of feeling. Animals are very sensitive to feeling. And in Asia, they think you're crazy if you talk to an animal. But the animal knows what. And they know because of the feeling that you're giving them while you're talking to them.
My bird knows when I'm sad, and it'll come onto my shoulder and jump up against me
You bet.
and say, Leon. And sometimes when I'm sitting there and I'm drooping off, it'll go, Leon!
That's great.
So
I lived in Northern California, and I had this dog we called him Rover because that's what he was. And he would follow I had a truck, and he would follow it all the way to town, which was 6 miles away. And one day it was raining, and it was cold, and it was miserable. And I pulled in, and I went to the post office, and I come out, and this lady was just coming out of the post office, saw the dog in the back of the truck, which I didn't know he was, and he looked really pathetic. And she chewed me out for leaving him out and as soon as she walked away, he smiled at me. You turkey, I'm gonna get even with you.
My birds will do that too. They'll complain to my wife about me.
Okay.
Yeah, on this, can we refer to the chart that was handed out?
Sure.
Okay, on the bottom of the chart, under personal, we have, you have this gray area of emotion.
Yeah, it's kind of bad because you don't have the colors on this, so let me try to explain them.
Well, let me just ask the
Okay.
question. Okay, so,
Here, go ahead.
are you intending that to cover craving, clinging, habitual tendencies, further to action, and then stopping before sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair?
No, it carries all the way over.
It carries all the way
Oh,
through.
okay.
It hits in the middle of craving, okay?
Oh, and it should be the entire.
Yeah,
Craving.
it can go all the way over.
Yeah. So when you're talking about emotions, you're talking about
Give those out to them because they have a color.
an unconscious or semi-conscious or just an emotional reaction to something.
Yeah.
Without essentially reasoning.
Right.
This is like
It's your old
somebody
habitual
says,
tendency.
"You're in my parking space, and I didn't know it was yours." But that raising of the voice, that's that whole.
Or
Yeah.
the big one is you're trying to get across the point that feeling is not emotion. That feeling happens first, and the emotions are anger, depression, anxiety, all those things. Those are emotions.
Right.
Feeling is simply a feeling, and it's not personal.
A mental feeling.
It's just a mental or physical sensation. It can be either mental feeling or bodily feeling, but it's just pleasant, painful, or neutral. And
Then the craving
yeah.
comes in, and you start taking that personally, and then you have this story with your clinging and your
right.
Okay. Now,
your
enter the
habitual
6 Rs.
tendency.
In order to have emotion, you have to have I have to be there.
Right.
But a feeling can happen without me there.
So enter the 6 Rs,
Mm.
and so we can witness the any of these points of either contact or a sixth sense door opening at any place, whether it's personal or impersonal, and at that point it ceases to provide the conditions for the next event to occur. And
If
therefore,
you 6R, then
right,
Yes,
and
that's
therefore
right.
the event
Right.
does not occur.
right.
No,
I just wanted to
Something.
see if that was a simple explanation.
Yeah.
Okay.
the mess up that I've seen happen is if somebody tries to go overboard with this and say, I'm just not going to feel then, and that'll solve the whole problem. I will stop the feeling from coming, you see. No.
And the question is, how are you going to stop that feeling when you stub your toe?
Right.
See?
The feeling is going to be there. What you do with that when it arises, that dictates what happens in the near future. If you 6R, as soon as that happens, then the craving of I don't like it doesn't arise. And with that, your story about why you don't like it, your concepts, your opinions, your ideas, and then your habitual tendency of whenever I kick something and stub my toe, I get angry, emotion, and that causes a birth of action for me to stomp around and curse. And that is the suffering.
So we can look at the emotional reaction as being well, it would be also, I mean, animals then are actually in a condition where everything that they're doing is reactive because there's no reasoning, and you could extend that same thought thinking, or I could, to infants and children who don't have reasoning ability, that they are emotionally reactive more
Very
times
much.
than not, just acting out over emotional reactions. I mean, this gets into psychology, I guess, but
Yeah, but
I'm just
also-
trying to use the terms correctly.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you can separate emotion and rationality. Like, you made a comment that emotions are irrational, but emotions are based on your story, which is your rationale, based on craving.
Based on a habitual pattern, on bhava, right?
Yeah.
Bhava is determining how you're playing out the emotions. Would that be right?
Well, your most important point is two things. All right. First, the Buddha discovered this incredible thing, the symptom for craving, and that is magical. That he uncovered the symptom for craving, which gives you the cue for not going into the I. You see? Okay, the symptom was the tension and tightness in mind and in body. This is incredible that he uncovered this tension and this tightness point. And then as you calm down, what happens is you start practicing, you have this much tension in your body, and when something pulls you away and you grab on it, if you release and come back, this is still here, and you're working with it all day, and so you got 15 years and no progress. Right? But as soon as you start to release and relax, you come back and here we go. Now we're going to go to another one. And you grab it and you release it and you relax. Where are we going? We're going towards Nibbana. What is Nibbana? Ni papancha, ni tightness.
You're just releasing and relaxing. You're not bringing up a wholesome, and you have to do that.
You have to do that, but what I'm just trying to show him was the point about the tension level is lowering. So it's key that he showed you two things. He showed you there was a symptom for craving. Therefore, if you can learn to detect the symptom, and the way you're detecting it early and earlier is when you release, relax, and smile and come back. This is lowering, release, relax, smile and come back. You're opening mind each time you smile. The alertness is sharpening, and you see it sooner as it arises, because this is going lower. As it arises, you don't see it till here. Next time you see it at here. Next time you can catch it here. Next time you can catch it here.
So the net
this is the progressive
deconditioning the habitual.
This is the retraining, right?
Deconditioning.
And
So
you're responding every time you let go of the craving. You're responding.
But the net effect is that we're deconditioning this habitual pattern.
He called
We're changing it.
Yeah, purification.
We're changing it from an
through
unwholesome to a wholesome.
It's the whole game.
Okay, we're going to have habits.
Well, yeah.
So what we have to do is make our habits good habits instead of bad habits,
Well,
or
so that's
getting
the
caught by the bad habits.
present of mindfulness and attention then
Yes,
is what that's doing. So that's the conditioning, is what
Yes.
you're saying.
yes.
Mindfulness and attention isn't the conditioning, no.
But isn't the releasing,
The releasing and the
isn't that
relaxing.
the deconditioning moment? And then the
Well, that's
relaxing-
part of it.
Part of it, yeah. It's not.
That's
Yeah,
not
part
the
of it.
whole thing. It's the release, relax, and re-smile. That's the reconditioning.
But what I'm asking, yeah, okay, but isn't that conditioning then? If you're bringing up a wholesome state,
Yeah.
that's
Of course.
conditioning.
Yeah.
Right.
And
That's
then
why I said-
releasing is
Replacing.
deconditioning.
There's
Well, there's
4
both
steps
steps.
in right
I
effort,
understand the
right?
steps.
Yeah.
I'm just
Two steps
and then
categorizing the
reconditioning.
steps, and I'm asking you if I'm right or wrong.
Well, there's 4 steps. The
I
two
know.
the two
Got
are
it, got it.
letting go, and the other are replacing. You can't leave a a vacuum in the universe.
I'm not saying you are, but are you?
You are changing old habits
Right. But the
and
change is a
developing new
deconditioning
habits. Yes.
That
you're
response.
Okay, deconditioning and reconditioning.
And reconditioning.
There you
Okay.
go. Deconditioning and
Okay.
reconditioning.
All right.
That's not bad. Yeah.
That's how I'm thinking about it these days.
Yeah,
Okay.
deconditioning and reconditioning.
If you do it right, there's what I think of as a subtle trap that may be blatantly obvious to others. But when I started trying this, I found attention very easily. I've got lots of them. And said, that's bad. I've got to do something about it. I think I'll release it. Not releasing it. I think that's not so good. And what I was doing was reinforcing the very thing I was trying to give up, because I needed to do this because I was doing it wrong, because I wanted to do it right, get right there. You see what I'm saying? This little circular thing.
Or
Where-
we're back to the cake recipe, you know. My
Right.
grandmother's cake was 12 inches high and it had a specific recipe and a specific way of blending the ingredients. You can't just throw the ingredients away or have all the ingredients and not blend it the same way and expect to get a cake that's 12 inches high. So if you have all the eggs and all the ingredients for the cake, but you just throw them in a bowl and whip them up instead of dividing the eggs and the egg whites and doing the stiffs first so they get high in the oven, you know? Okay, so now you have a cake come out that's that high. So
And it'll taste
it tastes
the same.
sweet, but it's not grandma's cake. It's like leather, you know. It's because you didn't follow
anytime you
instructions.
add any extra ingredient, you can look forward to that cake not being the same.
I wasn't even suggesting that
Yeah,
protocol
yeah.
was different. I was just trying to understand the categories
Yeah.
of what was happening. There is a deconditioning effect to something,
Yes.
and a conditioning effect
Yeah.
to the 6 hours.
And that's what I've been calling the personality development.
So there's a transformation.
You bet.
And the
there is.
transformation is due to the way that the conditioning and deconditioning work together, the recipe, as it were.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I
And
think in
that's-
traditional psychology, your reconditioning is like, they call it reappraisal, where you're meant to be mindful of the way you're reacting to something, and then you try to reason through why your response is unwarranted. per
But
se.
we're not reasoning here.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's what's interesting about the
Right.
difference.
Well, that's
you know?
why I'm not using
Like our
reappraisal.
reconditioning is, relaxation, letting go of the flight or fight response, bringing up something wholesome, I don't know, I just think it's interesting, whereas theirs is just reappraisal, it's just thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's why it doesn't work.
And that's why I think this works so fast, and that maybe works very slowly.
What we see in most of the books is he's trying to purify the mind, and what he means is doing exactly what you're saying. And he's talking about bhava, and he's saying retrain it this way, very specifically with the 4 steps in right effort. And you're calling the first 2 a deconditioning and the second 2 as a reconditioning. That's fine. The point you're trying to get across is you cannot leave a hole, or these 2 are just going to pop back
That's
in
right.
place again.
That's right. No,
That's what the person
they're
has to really learn.
perfectly simpatico, because that's where the great rapid transformation takes place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about transformation, like you say. I did Vipassana for 30 years. And nothing, well, it did. It happened for the first, year, and then, the next 20 years.
Is that
were
what you
down.
call immediately effective?
Yeah, I always thought it was effective for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's like,
Thank you.
Copies of that.
Hmm?
The last 2 handouts.
We'll give them to you. She just wants to finish
The
putting
last
the
handouts
colors
went
in.
around all the way or not?
No.
Where did they go to?
The last 2 actually we didn't get.
The last 2, the people in the front didn't get them on this side. They didn't get them. The small one and the one that has colors on it. I don't know where they went.
I've got some, I got a bunch here.
you got some of the small ones too.
Are you talking about Form
See, there,
107?
no, there's one form. No, there's one form that has 12 links, and there's one form that has 7 links. That's a training page. Okay.
You bet.
The 7 links are actually more usable
Well, I
because there's
just
one.
have-
We'll give it to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I have.
It'll probably end up on
We'll
your
hand
board.
these back. anyway.
Oh, we are giving it back. Everything.
Yeah, return form 107A.
2012 107A.
Oh, I've got plenty of these.
Where dependent
Oh,
origination
yeah.
had like 5 versions and presentations.
Come on, give them back if you got extras.
Don't you think this is a conversation worth having with someone like John Kabat-Zinn or one of these people who brings mindfulness training into psychology? This idea of
You go get him.
I'm the only one who like really wants to go talk to other people about
I
this
have
stuff.
laid it all out, written him. He never writes me back.
Yeah.
No, they have a very sellable product, and they're going with it.
Yeah.
And they're not going to
They
be
do all the time.
injecting anything that might make it lopsided and make people think further. Is the way I look at it.
Why am I not
You know, but some
teaching
people
at
just want to have
IMS?
that limited kind of practice of that mindfulness-based stress reduction, and they're not interested in the depth of the practice that we're describing.
Oh, but I'm not. On the medical side of things, I have doctors who keep encouraging me to write him, and someday he will respond.
Yeah.
Because you can take a child, away from the heavy medication and put him in the room to play the game so he doesn't take so much morphine before he dies. But they don't believe that you can explain to the child how this is working with this little page of 7 pieces and have him play the game himself. And actually they can, because I've worked with them, and they can at 9, 10, and 11 years old. So
No, but
we're
there's a
trying
lot-
to reach out
There's
to
a lot of
let
people,
them
though,
see that.
in this culture, though, they're just interested in
Yeah.
the technique
This
that
is the
can
quick
help
fix.
them cope with, with the stress that they're working with.
Mainstream.
Yeah.
And they're really not
Yeah.
interested in
It
awakening.
can be,
They're
though.
interested in dealing with the mental difficulties that they have.
That's
And
right, that's why
mindfulness
this is
works
so
for
good.
them, and they like it for that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to say that despite our lack of progress, I've meditated a long time and I'm having more results lately. But there's something about Buddha Dharma that has kept us all in it. Whether it was action-packed or not, there's something that kept us adhered, or there's something here. I know there's something here. It's different than anything else. And what the other teachers are teaching, they're popping this Buddha Dharma from whatever understanding they have into this culture, and people are responding to it. It'll be a wonderful thing to integrate it with a more effective practice. But I'm just interested, that popped into my head today, despite the fact that 30 years of practice wasn't yielding a lot of progress, there was just some faith about it that made us stay.
Well, a lot of the faith is, the Asians have that faith too,
I don't know
But
that I'm an easily faith-inspired
They keep going.
person.
It's true, isn't it? But when I was over there, they want more understanding. And it's all a question of, do you believe you have the absolute answer? There can't be anything better. Then you're here, right here, and you're not going to go any further. And if you're really still open to looking for even better, then you will try and see. This year was the first year any of us got to present to any kind of audience where there were psychologists, psychiatrists really listening in Sri Lanka. They were really listening to this. And there was only one person that said, I just don't agree with you. Out of like 20 of them sitting there, there was only one person like that. And that was neat, that they were willing to listen to it and actually take it away. And now we'll see. We'll see in the next year what they can do with it.
It's interesting how people are product loyal.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I always use Dove, it's like I always follow it this way. But there's just certain things about the Buddha Dharma, like open-handed, try for yourself, see for yourself.
Yep.
It's not exclusive. Anybody can
Right.
try. You don't have to drop whatever beliefs you.
No.
You can enter
Do
it
whatever
with
you want.
an experiment. So I think those kind of things bring people in, and hopefully they will make contact with a more progressive practice. But you know, it's interesting. You know, just interesting that despite all these years, how did I luck out to stay in it? Because I could have gotten like, oh well, heck with it. You know, here I still am, happily, and so are several other of us.
There is an enormous amount of compassion and integrity and courage and selflessness I have found in Buddhism, and it is valuable beyond belief just to have that. It is far more valuable to have that and this. But the people that I've met in it have been selfless and giving and spent their lives trying to help. And you can recognize from the words that there is meaning and substance here. Maybe not all of it, but we recognize that it's there. We just needed Bhante to show us.
Boy, someone should make a movie about all that.
That's what I'm saying.
It was real amazing when I was in Asia, because I kept on telling them that Easterners think that their mind works differently than Westerners. And it really kind of makes them unhappy to think that Western mind works exactly as the Eastern mind. Because dependent origination, that's the thing that's so brilliant about it. It doesn't matter what culture you're in, it works the same way. I mean, it's truly one of the most phenomenal things I've ever seen. This is the human condition. It has nothing to do with culture. But I had some people stand up and tell me I didn't know what I was talking about.
You have a way of doing that, huh?
Oh, yeah. Anyway, anybody have any more comments, questions? That's yours, May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fearsome fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we thus acquire for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, deities and gods of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they all protect the Buddha's